When you say a prayer, be thankful for the 4 basic elements of life. And that's fire, water, earth, and the air that we breathe. To give thanks for these 4 basic elements of life. But the greatest gift we ever got from our Creator was life.
Food sovereignty is the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agriculture systems.
According to the legend, an Anishinaabe boy named Pakawis used the hoop dance to tell stories about the animals. The dance is a way to honor the connection between animals and humans. With the hoop, Pakawis represented animal shapes and traditional practices that continue to sustain the Aboriginal way of living.
Here in northern Manitoba, Oji Cree and Métis communities are facing serious problems to procure healthy food for their families. In this region, there is a staggering 75% of food insecurity, 8 times more than the rest of Canada.
We were poor, but we ate good. We ate healthy food. Because we ate from the garden, we got meat from the bush, and then we had our own our cows, so that we had milk and butter and chickens for eggs. And so actually we had a healthy diet, even though we were poor. I think healthier than when you're rich.
Aboriginal people have a long and proud history based on rich cultural and spiritual traditions. Stories describe the connection between people, animals, and the natural environment. A culture of sharing was established among families that ensured food security and proper nutrition among community members. Food is seen as a sacred gift from the Creator. Hunting, fishing, gathering, indigenous agriculture and trapping were the only means to access food.
The demand for food sovereignty results from the fact that by 2005, 75% of the world's hungry people lived in rural areas. Northern Manitoba communities reflect these global trends.
The old people used to make a big garden, do lots of berries, moose meat and caribou meat, and they make bannock, and they make bread too.
Colonialism and its systems of production imposed by the Canadian government have been modifying the traditional food systems for hundreds of years. Historically, First Nations economies and food acquisition rested on the people's relationship to the land and its productivity. Forced settlement, the spread of Goliath hydro dam developments, extermination of wild animals, residential schools and mining projects triggered a distinct and radical break from sustainable traditional lifestyles.
What I like to identify as BH and AH, which is before hydro and after hydro. Between those two periods was incredible. But she also said it was very important that people understand where we come from and what our community was like before hydro. We were a hunting, gathering community. Once hydro shut that dam down, that river died. And I think to me that was a defining moment of when our lifestyle, the way we used to live, completely ended. It has never come back. It was complete, utter silence within that community. And I sat at that river for about 2 hours, and then I started to realize that that river had died that day. That it was never going to be reborn.
The flooding of the lake really affects our food chain as far as everything that we get off the land, and it's really damaged a lot of our hunting areas, our fishing areas, and even our berry picking areas. It's a terrible thing to live with on a day-to-day basis.
We're killing this lake, killing ourselves at the same time.
To provide an idea of how complicated life is in the north, we explored the reality of 14 northern Manitoba communities. A university study shows that the inequity found in these communities contrasts with the abundance and accessibility of healthy food found in the south of Canada. In this vast isolation, most of these communities do not have road access throughout the year. The only way to access many of these communities is by air. The price of a round-trip flight from Tuduli Lake to Winnipeg costs around $1,200, which is 2 times more expensive than flying return to Europe. Other communities in northern Manitoba are only accessible by rail, except for the 1 month, or less with climate change, when the winter roads are open. Many rail communities are without stores and require rail trips to purchase food in Thompson or the Pas, which takes several days. In addition to the extremely expensive cost of food, people must pay for their transportation and accommodation, as there are no commuter trains which return the same day. Food prices are expensive and volatile, so that 50 to 80% of the wages of the people in the north go to purchasing foods, often of lower quality, to fit within their limited budget.
The communities have to create their own stores. They can't depend on the monopolies that exist in our communities, because the monopolies are there for only one purpose, and that's to make money.
We'd go to Kenora, buy 3 trucks, buy a driver, load them full of groceries, come back and do like 4 or 5 trips. From Kenora to my reserve is probably about a good 15-hour drive. And that's on winter road. You know, we sold it cheaper than the northern, fresher food, and we tripled our money. How does the northern sell crappy food, make 5 times as much money, and get away with it? Saying, okay, if you don't change things, if they don't stop this, we're going to take our store and close it down. But we realized that we couldn't compete. There was no way, because they can fly theirs in all year round, and we can't afford that.
The lack of healthy food options is associated with the high rate of diabetes and obesity in northern Manitoba. Extensive compromises in food selection and total food intake have been documented, with severe levels of food insecurity.
Well, I was diagnosed with diabetes. I didn't take it seriously at first, but just about a year after that, it started to get noticeably different. a lot of times it is no energy. I started noticing that my 20/20 vision was not anymore. A friend here in the community just recently passed away due to complications, and that's when it kind of hit myself and my grandchildren. They read every label now. Through proper nutrition is probably going to be the only way that we can actually deal with diabetes.
How does it become a part of us in our bodies? And I think maybe that's what we should really understand, is that the diabetes is because of the sugar, and the sugar comes from the soft drinks, and we as families, parents, should teach our children about healthy eating. Maybe that's a good place to start.
Studies have found a relationship between poor diet and poor mental health, high rates of diabetes, obesity, malnourishment, and several other food-related illnesses. Manitoba has the highest rate of pediatric diabetes in North America, particularly in the 4 Oji Cree communities called Island Lake First Nations. In particular, diabetes has reached epidemic proportions among Canada's Aboriginal populations. Because of unique genetic, social, and lifestyle circumstances, people in northern communities are 3 to 5 times more likely than the general population to be diagnosed with diabetes. An exercise routine can help to control sugar level, obesity, and high blood pressure, but access to healthy food is also necessary.
Recently turned 56. Yeah, and I've been on dialysis for about 35 years. Kidney transplant for 18 years, and on dialysis right now and still going. I feel sad for the other people that are diabetic and they're being cut off, and here I am. I know how they feel. I know what they're going through. Yes, there's more and more people on dialysis, and more people going into diabetics, although they don't know it, don't know some of them.
And people are getting their limbs cut off, and
yes. I've seen some people here that I've been with, they got their limbs cut off while they're on dialysis. They're being sent out and coming back with no legs or arm, toes, fingertips.
Rates of food insecurity are so high that it's having a population level effect. The health impact on diabetes, the health impact on chronic diseases, at that level of the population is going to be huge. So something has to be done, and something has to be done soon. And that's going to require programming, working with communities to have a community food action plan and ensure that nobody is going hungry and has access to culturally appropriate healthy food.
Part of the problem with the treaty rights is that the federal government has abandoned its obligations, and they have been hoping for the past century that we'd forget about the treaties, but the thing is we have not forgotten about our treaties. So we're now organizing a grassroots movement called Treaties 1 to 11 as a way of engaging our people directly and understanding what the treaty means for us, including this whole the responsibility of the Crown to get us in, to get us involved in agriculture, because we have a treaty right to agriculture. A treaty right to agriculture.
Currently, these communities are taking initiatives to fight against food insecurity in spite of restrictive policies and a lack of meaningful government support. Community members are reintroducing traditional practices in addition to new ways of producing food.
in this life below. When this life is over, I am going home. Going home. Going home. Going home. Going home. Oh yes, I'm going home. Going home. Going home. Going home. Going home. When this life is over, I am.
A number of successful garden initiatives have taken place in northern Manitoba communities. For example, in Woboden, a teacher introduced a gardening program into the school curriculum. Since that inclusion, children have been showing an increasing interest in gardening. Also, in Leaf Rapids and Island Lakes, where the soil is poor and planting season is short, people are making the efforts to garden, sharing a plow and hose.
There's a huge misconception that European settlers were the first farmers in Canada, and that's totally not true. There's evidence that Indigenous people farmed 400 years ago, and just in Lockport, just outside of Winnipeg, there's a site right on the riverbanks that has been dug up, and archaeologists have found evidence of Aboriginal people gardening there, growing corn, beans, and squash pre-European contact. And these were very developed societies. And
all the virtues and characters can be linked to gardening, like the responsibility of the students to look after their garden and make sure it's watered and weeded. Patience, putting up with the weather, waiting for me to come. Cooperation, when we work in here, there's lots of cooperation that has to go on for this to happen. Respect, just pretty well every virtue you can think of can be linked to gardening. And it helps them develop a work ethic, and they're really proud of what they've grown, even if it's little wee tomatoes.
Hi, my name is Courtney and I've been gardening for 3 years.
Yes, I like gardening. We've been gardening for the past 3 years, and there's more people getting interested.
The first year, there was only the basic like potatoes, carrots, and onions, was it?
Yeah.
Those were the only things that they planted. But now they're asking for more variety of things to grow.
In July, we have a lot of daylight, pretty well 24 hours. We get about 2 hours darkness at the most.
And how does that affect the plants?
Well, everything grows. Like, I hardly buy any vegetables because I grow them. I grow about 100 pounds of carrots and all that, so potatoes.
The Northern Healthy Food Initiative provides seeds, plants, tools, and greenhouses through the Bayline Regional Roundtable and Frontier School Division. Four Arrows is implementing those programs in the communities located in Island Lake.
You take a little girl like that, and if she had to do that for, you know, the lifetime that she's in school, more than likely that's going to be instilled in her life for the rest of her days. You know, to go and have a little garden and have fresh lettuce and fresh onions and, you know, all that stuff.
I really am believing that not only can you have gardens that are a treat and a pleasure, but we can start growing some of the finest food in the world in the north.
One of the community members came in after the first year and says, "I'm not planting garden again." Those kids came in there and they raided my garden. I said, "Oh, they just pull it all up and throw it away?" "No, they took it." I said, "Hey, it's great." "What do you mean that's great?" I said, "That's what we were planning on, hoping to do. Get these kids to eat healthier lifestyle." I said, so it wasn't a waste.
Gardening is not the only solution to end food insecurity, and in some other communities, garden programs did not have much success because of a lack of resources. These very northern communities come from a strong tradition of hunting and gathering. Other programs, like the Country Food Program, are showing success.
The Country Foods Program is a program that's created by the community. Every community, northern community, Aboriginal community, already does what we do. Our culture is sharing, giving. So we're able to do a lot of different things,
locally, and then at the same time applying the cultural and traditional aspect, like the smoking of fish and meat. And not only that, all different organizations within the community, all different groups and individuals that want to participate or partake with the program, they're more than welcome. And we promote the teaching of cultural values and traditional skills. If we were government funded, then we'd be regulated. There's a lot of things we wouldn't be able to do. That's why we're keeping this internally, locally, community operated.
Virtually every fiber of policy in Canada, of the government, of the political and economic system, works against the food security of northern communities. We're basically trying to turn the northern communities into wage economy suburbs in a way that simply doesn't fit with the ecological circumstances or with the cultural context that the people live in.
With the growing population of human population and industry, we have to protect and manage our own resources. And by doing that, we can regulate and govern ourselves internally and locally, and still work with the conservation. You know, we don't totally. I mean, they were part of setting up the policies and.
Government regulations force community members to eat store-bought food. Nelson House promotes a country food program, which effectively feeds 1,500 people out of 2,500 in the community each year with healthy, culturally appropriate food, prioritizing elders and single mothers in need. The Country Foods program has procedures and guidelines to regulate and redistribute wildlife and its products to members of the community. It also utilizes expertise of local hunters and fishermen, providing employment. This program can be used as a model to provide respectful and healthier practices in northern communities.
So we like to think of the hunting way of life as backwards, as outdated, as miserable, all of these stereotypes we have. But if we were just to use one criteria, sustainability is the criteria for a way of life. The hunting way of life beats all other human inventions for a way of living, hands down, no competition, not even close. So they'll pay people to be drunk sitting in town, every day of the week. They won't pay people, they won't give people the same amount of money to buy gasoline and bullets to go out on the land and hunt moose and live a clean, healthy lifestyle and feel like they're responsible for their own lives.
The signing of Treaty 5 was an Anishinaabeg initiative to ensure that Aboriginal rights, including the right to occupy unsurrendered lands affirmed in the Royal Proclamation of 1763, would be maintained. Once the treaty process began, the government expected that the Native people would be content with reserves and a small cash grant. Instead, First Nations communities demanded agricultural equipment and training, education, medical supplies, and other treaty rights. However, policy developments with ultimately negative impacts have historically degraded the relationship between the Canadian government and First Nations communities to the point that communities are implementing their own systems to ensure the subsistence of their community members.
When it comes to the idea of food sovereignty, we do have that as treaty people. What is an obstacle is the perception that a treaty right cannot be used for commercial purposes. And these are the old ideas that we have to break down and destroy, because these are really not only curtailing the exercise of the treaty right, but they're also restricting our people from sharing that food, that natural food, with other communities.
Well, I have a nice, wonderful stories. I reach all my kids in Land Lake, trapping, fishing with my husband. So most of them know what I was brought up, except for my grandchildren. That's what they have to learn. I'm not going to go to my graveyard with what I know.
There's arsenic flowing into lakes and killing off the fish, and there's lead, and the fishes are getting smaller and smaller, and they're beginning to be tasteless.
This lake was very abundant in fishing. The fishermen really were always able to make a livelihood out of it. Fishermen used to be able to set 4 nets and get maybe 40 tubs of fish. Now they have to set 40 nets to get 4 tubs of fish. You know, that's been a total reverse. It's really a lot of hard work for the fishermen to accomplish what they had done in the past.
We don't have northern pike no more on Lake Winnipeg. We don't have jumbos, the whitefish. We have whitefish that big. We don't have those no more. There's no programs to back the habitat up. Not at all. You have little ones up south end, like Winnipeg, but nothing in the north. I said, it's like they forgot about us people up north, you know. That we still are people. Doesn't matter what color we are.
The ice fishing program in Island Lake provides equipment and shows community members how to harvest fish from the nets. A net can feed 20 people per season.
Okay, we ordered like 22 nets. You could easily feed over 200 people for the rest of this winter. With those nets, like not only those people are utilizing the net, but their extended family as well. So one net might feed at least 20 people with their families. Each class will go to check the net. During that time, they will be taught how to fillet fish, how to prepare it, cook it, eat it. So you're looking at about at least, say, close to 300 students learning on the traditional awareness.
A pilot project will provide interested people who build a chicken coop all necessary materials, including a poultry production manual, 60 chickens or 10 turkeys, grain, feeders, and chicken fencing. With basic training and provision of supplies, poultry can be easily and affordably raised in northern communities. Raising poultry can provide families with fresh meat and eggs and a valuable source of fertilizer for gardening.
They were nice, big, healthy. They almost looked like the size of turkeys, a young turkey. Yeah. And they were they had a lot of space to roam around in. They're healthy. So it was like, for me, it was, I knew what I was feeding the chickens, and they were getting exercise, and you know, it was the best thing for our family anyway.
When I seen what was happening with the chickens, especially the store-bought ones or the cows and so on and so forth, injecting them with steroids, it's just, whoa, I couldn't believe that. So going down there, feeding the chickens twice a day, and every time that they see me, well, they come running at me, and I feel so in love. You know, I'm so loved by chickens, right?
One of the long-established programs to increase access to healthy food in the North is the Food Mail Program, which subsidizes the cost of shipping nutritious food to isolated northern communities. The program is under review.
Yeah, the Food Mail Program is a federal program that it applies to certain communities. Not all isolated communities are under the Food Mail Program. A few of the communities in northern Manitoba are. Most of the communities in the territories are. The changes that have recently been proposed have also been problematic, namely leaving the Food Mail Program to the northern stores to deal with. And in many communities in the north, and people will know this in these communities, the northern store is often the only store in this community. And as a result of the lack of competition, the prices are already very high. Yes, obviously transportation costs are included, and the costs involved are recognized, but oftentimes the prices are far exceed those factors. So now we're moving to a private company, often the only company that has a monopoly in these communities, and people are very concerned that this isn't going to make any changes, and that not only that this means that the government is stepping back even more from regulating the Food Mail Program. Yes, it still has a role in regulation, but through a private enterprise it's even less. And what does that mean for that role of accountability to government? And where is the place for communities to say, wait a second, this is not working for us?
Another important approach is rehauling the Food Mail Program so that it works on both ways to provide commercial fishermen with opportunities and hunters with opportunities to exchange food rather than a one-way ticket to the north. where the food is flowing up and the fishermen and the local hunters don't benefit.
The influence of privatization and other neoliberal policy initiatives around food production and food consumption have been threatening the survival of small-scale farmers, fisherfolks, and hunters. They are suffering the impositions of a free trade market economy. Strict regulations are threatening the subsistence and health of communities in the north. The Manitoba Public Health Act and food handling establishment regulations negatively affect northern communities. Through these acts, inspectors from the south travel to northern communities to examine the quality of the food served in public establishments. The inspectors are enforcing regulations that require communities to consume store-bought food from the south and are limiting the consumption of traditional food, which is considered a health hazard. For example, the fish quota system forces fishermen to discard millions of pounds of whitefish annually. Fishermen are fined for giving away fish to the hungry.
The pickerel is worth $2.40 a pound, and whitefish is about 90 cents a pound, so all the fish goes on the quota. So what happens to the whitefish is it gets thrown on shore because you'd rather have $2.40 than 90 cents, right? And this happens in every community in northern Manitoba. This fish should be just taken off quota, and then the fishermen can sell it, and you can get more value for our fish than just throwing it away.
This set of regulations is compromising the health of community members and contributes to the monopoly on food by the Northern Store.
Yesterday's song. I wish I could slip into muskeg and spruce, encircling myself with northern lights, wolf songs and nighthawks rustling the underbrush, catching the smells of the past still on me, even though my feet are concrete hardened, and my spirit tells of stories of neon and blues. I am the son of muskeg and spruce. I still dance to the music of yesterday.
My big wish, I guess, would be to be able to see a lot of our younger people do some of the traditional ways of preparing meat, being able to hunt it, and getting involved in the gardening programs for the vegetables and the berry picking, everything to do with our food chain in the north here.
This large survey is a wake-up call to Canadians that it's not only third world countries that have food insecurity and people going hungry, it's also people in Canada, in remote communities, in northern communities that have limited incomes and very extremely high costs for food. There also has to be a review of policies. This is indeed a result of policies limiting country food use, local fish, and local meat, and the fact that they can't be sold and they can't be given away for free to public institutions and used, or any public event. So this really brings the culture and country food use underground when it's an important part of the culture and should be celebrated and supported.
But that will require a policy shift in thinking. It has to go beyond the idea of supplementing the freight costs in the case of remote communities. It has to engage the people in the idea of food production to the extent they can in the climate in which they reside. So we need to get busy, growing our potatoes, our carrots, our vegetables in great numbers to sustain all our population.
What we need in this town is employment. We need jobs here. That would help a lot of people, give them a lot of pride and self-esteem.
There are many people in northern Manitoba that live under the poverty line, something that of course is unacceptable in a country like Canada in 2010 with such great wealth. It's very worrisome that our national government hasn't taken a leading role in establishing a food security policy. We need a national policy, we need leadership, we need incentives, we need supports for everybody along that food chain from production to consumption.
The path to food sovereignty is inextricably linked to local grassroots solutions and the convergence of ideas from the past with the present to build a more promising future. The cumulative loss of Indigenous foods over time has resulted in a change of diet that has many negative impacts on health, environment, social and cultural practices. The colonial acquisition of land, the abusive residential school system, rapid urbanization, and a new wage economy have created a crisis, which requires that we all support a restoration and a revitalization movement of Indigenous people.
I like healthy food that makes me strong. I eat carrots and strawberries and bananas. That make me strong and good.
We have to do the healing first. And doing gardening and doing projects like this is very healing for the community because they're seeing something positive. I think we're going to come out of 700 years of oppression and suffering. That's what our elders tell us, prophesize.